It's from the areas. Clement Masombo, KTN News.
All right, so let's have a conversation about what's happening in these counties, the areas that have been declared zones that need people to actually move out, and what does that mean for those people. Joining us in this conversation is the Law Society of Kenya President Eric Theuri, who's here with me in the studio, and joining us via video link is the Laikipia North MP Sarah Korere to basically have an update of this. Eric, we have seen from that report that as a law society, there are areas where you have taken issue with the government order. Just for clarity, what is the issue?
Well, you know, the declaration by the CS for Interior, in a way, suspends the operation of the Constitution. And to that extent, then it is null and void because the Cabinet Secretary has no power to suspend the application of the Constitution in any part of this country.
How does it suspend the operation of the Constitution?
Because the communities that live in that area, that the people that live in that area have a right to use their land, which is guaranteed by the Constitution. Mm-hmm. And then secondly, if you look at Article 238 of the Constitution, which gives the principles in terms of what should be considered when it comes to questions of national security. One of them is the rule of law and respecting the rights of communities. So what the CS has done is to criminalize an entire community by virtue of living in a particular area, whereas the people that live in that area, the communities that live in those areas, are actually entitled to protection by the government. It is the government that is being the aggressor. So it may look a light on paper, but what the CS has done is completely.
So the import of this, what you're saying, is it basically removes these rights from these people. Is there no section of any law that allows the CS in charge of security to actually order some of these things? For example, the Public Order Act. Can he say that, because there's an ongoing issue here, an emergency of some sort, then we have to take certain measures that would affect people, like you're saying?
And that's why there's a requirement, under the Public Order Act to gazette and to say that you are limiting certain rights for purposes of preservation of security. And that is what they have done under Public Order number 1 and Public Order number 2. And they have said in these areas, we are taking certain measures, and we have imposed a curfew, a dusk to dawn curfew. So those are the measures that they have imposed by law.
Okay.
But these new directives that have been given by the CS of Interior, where are they? What are they based on? It is just a statement that he made, a roadside declaration.
Yeah.
It is not backed by any legal instrument. But secondly, and most important, when you have a right to your property, when you are living on your own land, the government cannot come and tell you, move from this land, because the land that you're staying in is insecure. And if you don't move, your presence there is criminal. So it has no right whatsoever. You cannot criminalize an entire community. And in every community, there are criminals. In every community, there are criminals. So how can you go to an area and say that now this area, because there are several criminals, all of you are criminals, and so you need to move out. If you don't move out, then we make the presumption that you have stayed because you are a criminal. So if you have nowhere to go, are you a criminal? And you see, the worst thing about this pronouncement, roadside declarations that have been made by the CS, is that they are not giving the communities there an alternative.
Okay.
What is the sensible and proper thing to do is to say that we have noticed that as we conduct our operation, that they are criminals that perhaps may be residing in communities, and so therefore we need to find a way to isolate this. Remember, these communities also have a right to be given security by the government. So the government should have, in the first place, created safe havens and said, in this area, or in this school, or in this church, or in this place, we have created a camp. There's food, there's medical, there's water, there's whatever for
There's
your
shelter.
animals, there's shelter, and there's everything. So move here
As we deal
with this situation.
Right.
The other question you want to ask yourself is, why do you require these people to move? And remember that the history of this country is replete with several human rights violations that have been committed by the security forces as they attempt to pacify certain areas, especially in the north of this country. So we've had the Wagala massacre. So when a government is telling people, move out so that we deal with criminals, and these criminals, remember, are Kenyans, you ask yourself, exactly what kind of security operation is the government intending to effect in that area, that they are now beginning to look at it and say, if you stay in, you will be part of collateral damage.
So your fear is extrajudicial execution of this particular operation?
Not in that sense. What we are saying is that the minister, the CS, is engaging in acts that are extra constitutional.
Okay.
He has no powers to issue those directives. The directives suspend the operation of constitutional rights that are enjoyed by landowners and the communities in that region. And so to that extent, they are illegal. But the other question then comes in, that why should you engage in these measures? Because as you engage in any measures, and this is what the Constitution says, that as you attempt to limit the rights of people, there must be a question of proportionality. So the question here is this, that what is so urgent that you must move out these people without even giving them alternatives in terms of where they can stay, so that you can deal with this security situation? So in terms of proportionality, what exactly do you intend to do to achieve, so that you are now saying that we need to remove you because if you stay there, you'll be collateral damage?
Heavy questions. Some of these areas that the minister has asked people to move include Ngelecha Hills and Gorges, Ramacha and Losokoni Caves, Laromoru Gorges, Karau Hills, Nosidan Escarpment, Rugus Caves, and the Amaya Gorges at the interface of Baringo, Laikipia, and Samburu counties. Those are included in the orders, and people living in those areas were given until end of today to vacate those areas. Now, joining us on via Zoom is the Member of Parliament for Laikipia North, and this is the Honorable Sarah Korere. Mheshimiwa, good morning and welcome. Not good morning, but good evening, and thank you very much for joining us in this conversation, Mheshimiwa. Tell us about the situation in your area, because some of these areas that have been mentioned here are actually in your constituency. Have people moved out?
Well, I don't know whether you are getting me clearly from that side.
Yes, we are hearing you.
Yeah, it's quite a tricky thing, and some of us who come from those areas, we are actually in a catch-22 situation. Because the bandits also have used the local community as a human shield. And some of these local communities have gone through untold suffering under the hands of these ruthless bandits. And from where I sit, I'm very, very concerned that, yes, the day-to-day activities of the innocent Kenyans, of the local Mwananchi, of the children who have to go to school might be interrupted. And that is why we would want to say, yes, the government must make sure that the day-to-day activities of the innocent people must not be interrupted. But again, the bandits must be flushed out. And if you look at, for example, in Laikipia, when you come to the gorges at the Nature Conservancy, they have caused untold suffering to the local communities, whereby the bandits will come out at night, attack the local community, kill people, maim them, take their property away, and drive it inside the gorges at the Laikipia Nature Conservancy. So if the government does not have to do what it takes to flush them out, then in essence, we are saying that we just leave the local community under the masses of these ruthless gangs.
Let me ask you, Mheshimiwa, just so you can clarify. So you're saying that some of these bandits hide in these caves and gorges. Are there local communities that have actually established settlements in the same caves and gorges?
Beg your pardon?
Are there people from your local community who also have houses and homes in the same caves and gorges?
Well, I wouldn't want to talk about the caves and gorges, but I'll give a very good example of the Mombasa forest, where I actually am from, and it is one of the hotspots that have been identified by the government. Yes, if you look at the Mombasa forest, it is home to the indigenous Yaku community, which is a very small community of hunters and gatherers in Mombasa forest. So yes, the forest is their natural habitat, and yes, the bandits have also taken to the forest as their hideout.
So when they are told to move out, like they've been told to move out by the government, where, in your best understanding, are they going to?
Well, that's why I told you, some of us coming from those areas, we are in a catch-22 situation, because telling somebody to move out of his home, you know, remember, you are telling somebody who doesn't know any other home other than the home you are telling them to move out from, and the government have not designated, you know, specific places where these people are supposed to go. So yeah, in a way, I think the government should have done better than that. But yes, there is an urgency to have things done, and done urgently and done nicely.
There's been this other public concern on if you've told people to vacate and you've given them, let's say, 24 hours or 48 hours, like we've seen in the last 2 days, how do you sieve between the innocent people and the bandits themselves? How do you know that the people who are living in these areas are not the bandits just going and occupying another safe ground until the operation is declared over and they move back into the same area to continue operating the way they've been operating before?
Well, I think from where I sit, I can tell you the local communities and the innocent people are actually also very anxious for their own security. And I think they will cooperate with the government somehowly, because either way, if things were left the way they are, then they will continue suffering. And it's only a person who probably has something to hide that will not heed the advice of the government. But from where I sit as a leader, I must also admit that we are taken aback by that kind of an order, because I really don't know where some of these communities will have to go. But, well, yeah, things are murky.
Mheshimiwa, the LSK president has just told us here that from where they sit as a law society, what the CS for Interior and Administration has basically done is extra-constitutional. He does not have the powers to demand or to order people out of their homes. You're a lawmaker. What do you say about this?
Well, I think, look at it like this. I think it is also not constitutional when the lives and the property of the dwellers of some of these areas are not secured and their security is not assured. So either way, it's, you know, when you look at constitutional issues, it's also a constitutional right for the members of these communities to be secured, and it's actually incumbent on the government to use whatever means they can to assure them of their security and the security of their property.
Mr. President, where do we balance this? Because there's what you're saying, and there's what Mheshimiwa is saying. She is actually talking about the people that she represents, the people that she knows, she's grown up with them, she lives there with them, who have suffered untold suffering from these bandits, and the need for the community to support the government in bringing security to them, but at the same time, the unfolding issues. When you talk about the legal side of it and the humanitarian side of it, how do we strike this balance?
You know, the government has one responsibility to provide security. Not just security to the person, but also security to the property of the communities that live around that area. So the one thing that is clear is that the government has failed in its obligation to the communities around that region. That's the first thing. The second thing is that, unfortunately, the government cannot engage in illegal means to deal with an illegality. So that this is not a case of an eye for an eye. You must use the law to be able to deal with the illegal issues that are arising in that community. The other thing, and this is something that has been seen, is that are we creating, and I would want to use this word with a lot of sensitivity, a situation that is akin to sometimes the situation that is obtaining in the Middle East. That because of government action, you radicalize a community because the harsh measures that the government is taking on these communities and criminalizing these communities is likely to breed contempt. And the one thing which you asked, and it's a question that has to be asked, is if you have identified and you have said that this area we think they are bandits, then if the bandits move with the community, how are you able to tell that the bandits have either not moved with the community or they have moved with the community? So crime cannot be attributed to a community. Crime is individual in the manner in which it's happening. And I think we should also stop perhaps giving it some fancy name and calling it, cattle rustling. This is actually criminal, and in our books, would amount to, robbery with violence. But that is what the government ought to confront. And so therefore the question should be, in terms of the measures that they are taking, are they sustainable long-term measures that will actually give peace and security to the communities living in the affected areas? Because these communities are entitled. They are not lesser children of the Republic of Kenya. They have an equal right to get security and protection of their life and property, just like any other Kenyan in any other part of this country. So then when you begin to question and look at the measures in terms of proportionality, you begin to see where the government is going wrong. And for me, we have, unfortunately, the obligation to actually call out and say what the government is doing is the wrong thing. They, in terms of, they have the resources, they have the security apparatus that are able to pick out intelligence and to be able to deal with these challenges. There are other questions that come in as you look at all these things. The communities around there keep cattle. or keep animals.
Yeah.
Has the government done anything to provide the communities there with feed for their cattle? Is it doing anything to provide them with food? And we know in some of those areas it has not rained for so long that people are suffering from famine and hunger. So when you aggravate all these challenges that they are facing, when they are looking up serikali saidia, and instead of serikali saidia, it is actually the government that is now aggravating their challenges. And you saw what was happening. Yeah? In any confrontation and in any situation where there is a breakdown of peace and security, the people who suffer the most are women and children. And when you look at the people who are moving, it was mostly women and children. So what message are we sending as a country when the most vulnerable victims of any insecurity are not taken care of? Yeah, that we are leaving our women and children to nature.
Mheshimiwa, come in here and maybe you can tell us, from what you deal with on the ground, are there any measures that the government has taken to address the plight of the women and children, like what the LSK president is asking? So has there been have there been any steps taken to feed the cattle, to feed the livestock, to water the livestock, to give them a safe area to graze? Are those conversations taking place in the community?
In as far as I'm concerned, I think when this notice of 24 hours was given recently by the Cabinet Secretary for Interior, I think nothing much of conversation in the community has seemed to be taken place. But you remember these operations started I think a month ago. And when actually the government declared the area's operation zone, on the contrary, what happened, I don't think the security forces really did any operation, but the bandits came in full swing to do a serious operation. And if you can remember in Samburu West, just last weekend, a principal chief was killed, a very senior government officer. Sometimes in December, in my home, we lost a chief who was actually my relative. He was my brother-in-law, who was killed, in broad daylight. His home, bandits walk, kill the chief, and walk away. And so it's been very difficult for the local community staying in these areas. And yes, I agree, over the years, probably the government has not done what it must do to secure the lives of the locals. And because I want to believe that the Cabinet Secretary for Interior cannot just wake up from slumber and think to do things in a particular way, I want to believe that some expertise must have been, consulted and must have been put into the process. And as we are only waiting anxiously to see what will happen, because to us, whether they do something or not, either way, our lives are in danger.
It sounds to me, Eric, so successive governments have not done what they ought to have done. And the situation has gotten to this level. So the CS for Interior, who is a professor of law, the Attorney General, who is a former Speaker of the National Assembly, and so they also understand the whole journey of lawmaking, they're making these decisions. Do you think they're actually making these decisions ignoring the law, like you're saying, or the various provisions of the law, or lacking a deeper understanding of what the law says?
My own feeling is that the security situation is causing an embarrassment to the government, and the law and the constitution have become a hurdle, and because they have become a hurdle, they have decided to put the law aside so that they can deal with this embarrassment. The danger of doing that is that now we are subjecting ourselves to engaging in illegalities so that we can deal with the illegalities that we are facing. In the long term, they have an effect. In the long term, they have an effect. And then so, we should not be celebrating when the government now says that it will, because the law is an inconvenience, that they will put it aside. Remember, we have also asked questions about the military-led operation. The Constitution is very clear that you must seek approval from the National Assembly.
Yeah.
And what I feel is that going to the National Assembly will embarrass the government even more. And that's the reason why they don't want to go to the National Assembly, because questions will have to be asked about the capacity of the police to respond to these challenges. Why is it that the police are not adequately funded and resourced to be able to deal with these challenges, that you have to bring in the military? Those are questions that must be asked and answered in Parliament before you get that approval. So that tells you that we are picking a convenient route to be able to deal with this issue. And so that their concern is, first and foremost, let us get ourselves out of this embarrassment, as opposed to taking measures to find long-term solutions to some of these challenges.
But how would you balance that then? Because you have this serious situation that's ongoing now. The law as it is puts all these hurdles on your path, but you must address this issue today.
It is not a hurdle. There is nothing, even, and this is what we say, that even the devil, the day he will be arrested, he is entitled to due process. Yeah? And so, giving people due process, ensuring that you respect the rights of the communities, respecting the rights of property of the communities and the individual owners that live in that area, it is not doing a favor to anyone. It is what a state founded on the rule of law must do. Actually, any state founded on the rule of law must use the resources, and that is why, as people, we donate our powers to ensure our own security on the government. So that, again, the government has the resources to be able to guarantee my security. So what happens when government is unable to guarantee my security? What happens when government is unable to guarantee my right to use my property? That is the concern here. And so therefore, it is upon the government, because it has the resources, to use legal means to deal with the security challenges that they are facing.
Practically, Eric, practically, what is it that you would want to see the government do? What would you have wanted to see the Minister for Interior do before making this evacuation order?
Let me ask you, what is so difficult in going into the community and saying that we have created this as a safe space? There is food, there is water, there is medical facilities.
So start with those first.
You start with those first.
Identify an area, bring in ample security,
the only
bring
way,
in food and water, and shelter.
Yes,
okay.
It is the only way you get the community to support the things that you're doing. But when you create hardships for them, then what do? They just comply, but they are left feeling aggrieved. Yeah? And so what they are doing is to radicalize the community around that area, because they'll be remembering the government did this to us. The government treated us inhumanely. And you see, one of the cardinal rules about a human being is that inherent dignity. Yeah. So that is what you guarantee first. And look at it. When someone gives you 24 hours or 48 hours to vacate from your premises, what do you carry with you? Out of your house, what do you carry? You just carry your clothes and your beddings and something to cook. You know, they have not given you any food. They have not given you any accommodation. You're going to you are likely to sleep out in the cold. If you have a kid, they are likely to be, you know, thrown out to the vagaries of the weather. So how does the government expect that the community around there will support these measures? Of course they will support by moving away, and the moving away is not an indication of support. It's an indication of the fear that they know the government has force, and so therefore if we don't, we will die. So they are moving away out of fear.
It's fear. It's not
it's fear. It's not because they are supporting the measures that the government is putting in place. And remember that these people, in the first instance, are entitled to protection by the government.
And they are victims of?
Yes, they are actually
the lack of protection by
victims of lack of protection.
Mheshimiwa, come in here and let's engage the LSK president with you, because he's saying, look, the effect of this is that people are moving, yes, but it's moving out of fear, not moving out of proper support for the government, and that the government should have started somewhere else. You've also said the same thing. You are saying that as local community leaders, you're raising those questions and you're asking yourself, so how should the government have handled this? As a member of parliament, you have powers of oversight. What is it that you and your fellow MPs and legislators, particularly those from the pastoralist areas, what is it that you have discussed in terms of raising as questions to government? Mheshimiwa, I think we have an issue with that. Please unmute your mic, Mheshimiwa Korere.
Yes.
Let's try now. Yes.
That's better. One question based on the past
it's still low.
Last week.
All right, we can get you now. We can get you now. I think we're having an issue, a technical issue with getting your sound. Let's sort it out and then we come back to you. What would you like to see Mheshimiwa Korere and the other members of parliament from these counties, from Laikipia, from Samburu, from West Pokot, from Elgeyo Marakwet, from Turkana, all these areas that are facing insecurity? What questions should they be asking of government?
Not just all the MPs from the regions that are affected.
Of course, yes.
All the legislators, but of course, particularly perhaps the legislators from the affected communities. They really must question the steps that the government has taken in terms of oversight. How effective are these measures? And you have to remember this, that the statement that the cabinet secretary gave also said that they have identified financiers, and spiritual leaders and all those. Has there been any action that has been taken on those people? No action has been taken. Then the other question we need to ask ourselves is, there is a huge proliferation of guns within that region. Where are these guns coming from? Because unless you have long-term plans to be able to ensure that these regions are safe, that these guns that these young people are using, and when you look at the profile of most of those bandits, they are young people. They are young people. So what is happening? It is because they have no access to opportunities. They have no access to opportunities to go to school. And what is the government doing? the message that the government is sending by telling children to move away from their homes without even giving them an opportunity to go and probably be, and this is a school term. Yeah. So what is the government saying? It is sending to them an implied message that you are going to school, that your normal life is not something that the government gives priority to. And so this is not just an issue that will be dealt with from a security perspective. There must be a long-term plan that looks at it and says, how do we deal with these issues? How do we give these children access and change their lives for the better by giving them an opportunity perhaps to access education, an opportunity to have a different life from the life that they know it, because this issue of banditry has become like an extreme sport.
It's been normalized.
That they engage in, and it's normalized. So you grow up, as you go to, hard cattle, you are exercising, you are engaging in target shooting. So you find children who are 10 years, who are expert marksmen. And you all know the history of use of children in wars, because they have not yet developed to that capacity where they are able to perhaps even differentiate between what is right and wrong. And so if you lead them along a path that seems to suggest to them that this is the right path, then they adopt it. The mistake that the government is making here is that it is also showing the children in those affected areas that this is the path that the government is going to take, an illegal path to deal with these challenges. So how do you expect these products of illegality, of government action, to tomorrow be law-abiding citizens?
Pertinent questions that you raise, and I just want to look back into the situation that we are finding ourselves in. Obviously, like you've said, there's proliferation of arms, not just small arms, but heavy weaponry in this area. Kenya is a focal point on small arms in the region. So they gather intelligence and they know the movement of illegal arms in the region. The focal point is Kenya. If you look at the capacity of the intelligence services, the capacity of the security services, basically to just find out what kind of crime is taking place in an area and to catch up with the criminals is very high in other parts of the country. Why not in this particular region? Why get to a point where people with heavy weaponry are able to repulse and actually stand up to security forces? What does it symbolize here? What does it signify?
It basically signifies a country that has no systems, a country that has no institutions. And this at a broader national level demonstrates the kind of challenges that we've been facing with the country. The fact that the police force is not being used for the right reasons. When you politicize issues such as the provision of security, when you politicize the police force so that it becomes not an agent of offering security to the country, but it becomes, an appendage of political forces, then you have this kind of problems, because you ask yourself, with all these resources, why is it that we're having bandits who are better armed and probably better trained than the police? So that in effect tells you that we have a problem, because when it comes to this political usage of the police force, the police are extremely efficient. So why is it that they are not efficient in providing security along those areas? So those are broader conversations at a national level that point to a failure of government to have the right priorities. If you look at where we are putting our money, for example, we have increased allocation, budgetary allocation, to the office of the president and the vice president for purposes of refreshments and all these other things. We are now creating an office of the spouse for the prime cabinet secretary, using also public resources on those things, instead of focusing these meager resources that we have on the things that really matter. Yeah, because the measure of a country, it has been said before, is in how it treats not its powerful in the society, but the vulnerable in society. So look at this. Look at the messaging that we are sending, and it's really a high time that the entire country ought to come together and say that this kind of skewed usage of our resources, it should come to an end, because that is the only way that the gentleman in a street in Runda and the gentleman in a street in Kapedo will feel that they are equally entitled as Kenyans to call themselves and proudly refer to themselves as Kenyans.
Let's see now if we can get Mheshimiwa Sarah Korere on the line. Mheshimiwa, let's test your signal again. The question that we had asked earlier is, what is it that members of parliament, you included, should be asking of the government? But I just want to skip to the next question, which is, do you, Sarah Korere, MP for Laikipia North, have confidence that this operation is going to bear fruit? Still having the same issue with sound. Let's try again. Try unmuting your mic. Let's see if we can get you. Is your mic muted? Have you unmuted your mic? No, we cannot hear you, Mheshimiwa. Okay. Unfortunately, we just have to drop that link there. But an important question that I was asking her, I'm going to ask you. Do you have confidence that this operation is going to bear the desired result? Which is, the desired result is to crush the bandits once and for all. That's what the government has said. This one, sio tafadhali, we've got to crush the bandits, but at the same time, do it humanly.
I have my doubts about it. It may, in the short term, pacify the region. Pacify in the sense that the bandits may simply just retreat, or they might move back into the communities and reintegrate themselves back into the community, and we have to take into consideration that some of this and some of the cultural practices around this issue that have allowed the question of banditry to grow and to become a menace that it is today is because the community in itself supports some of these things. There have been sentiments within some of these communities. You go to the Pokot and they tell you, no, the government has been supporting the Samburu against us, and that is the reason why they are only taking Samburu guns and taking Pokot guns and not taking Samburu guns. So if you go to the community, they also have certain grievances against the government, and the government is still playing into still playing the same game. And after this, the challenges are not going to go away. The question of these arms, if you are unable to cut the supply chain, they will come back.
Yeah.
If you are unable to deal with these so-called financiers and spiritual leaders and all those things that the CS talked about, because he was high on words and very little on action, we're going to be back here in another 2 or 3 months after they come out and say, we've pacified, no banditry attacks and people we are going to go back there. So there is a need for us to actually see a clear long-term and focused solution that in the short term, this is what we intend to do, go into this region and pacify, but in the long term, this is what we intend to do. Yeah, can we work at a situation where we, for example, provide security buffers between these warring communities, so that we all know that your limit is here, and you have like maybe some miles, yeah, of buffer zones, so that and these buffer zones are properly demarcated and dealt with. The other challenge of movement of animals for purposes of pasture. Do we have a long-term plan to ensure that then these people cannot move their animals here for purposes of pasture, because you are now providing that pasture? How are we addressing the questions of access? Because again, when a region is remote, as it is, that is where the bandits are taking advantage, because these are locals. They understand the terrain like the back of their hands. By the time the police are coming, they are trying to find where this hill begins and ends, and where this cave is, and where all these things are. But these men have lived in that community for long. They know it like they have some Google map that does not need technology to assist them to know exactly where they want to go and how to take advantage of the terrain. So there ought to be a national conversation, and that is what I feel is lacking. And that is why I'm also apprehensive of the move that the government has taken of not trying to involve the representatives of the people at parliament, and so that these questions can be asked, so that we look at resource allocation and ask ourselves, this money that we are giving to buy refreshments and to do other things in other offices, can it be used better in other places to ensure that you provide...
In addressing more pressing needs.
Yes.
Eric, as a Law Society of Kenya, I know lately you have been quite litigious. You've gone to court, you've raised issues, but there must be other avenues also that you have at your disposal, just like all of us Kenyans. But as the ones who understand the law, you've raised several issues. One, the constitutionality of the actions that are being taken. Two, the involvement of the military without parliamentary approval and the kind of oversight the parliament gets. Three, the humanitarian issues that are emerging here. Four, the role of parliament itself in oversighting the executive and making sure that this operation addresses not just short but medium to long-term areas. What is it that the Law Society is planning to do? Or what can you do?
We've had engagements, both mostly, of course, informally, with the leadership at various stages, and at a very informal stage, we appear to have some sort of consensus in terms of the approaches that ought to be taken. But I think the political imperatives then make certain legal, as I've told you before, that the real legal issues are skewed in favor of political considerations. So, sometimes litigation works in a way that then it forces somebody to address themselves to the situation that it is. And for us, we find ourselves in a very somewhat difficult position where you expect that the government would comply with the law. Of course, we all know that the government doesn't like complying with the law. It finds the law an inconvenience most of the time. And so we are not afraid at any particular time to call them out and tell them that you are wrong as you are doing this. But the most disturbing issue about the scenario is the kind of suffering that the communities are facing, not just from the bandits, and they have endured from these bandits for so long, and these criminals for so long, that it is also now the government that is also adding a misery onto the so many untold tribulations that they have gone through. So I think that we hope and we want to really take this opportunity to urge the government to look at this situation with a human eye and adopt measures that have a human face to it, so that they can be able to once and for all deal with this menace, to actually address the real problem, which is that in parts of this country, if you work in the police force, you are not going there to enforce security, but most of the time you are sent there as a punishment. And why is it considered a punishment? Because they are very few resources. So you have a skewed allocation of resources, that people are working in an area where there are bandits, but they do not have vehicles, they do not have equipment that can be able to make them effective in engaging these bandits. And that is what is raising the bravado of these criminals, because they know that this government lacks the capacity to respond effectively to their threat. So they can go down. They will go down. But for as long as they are able to assess the government and see that their response is a weak response, and these policemen are not adequately resourced to be able to deal with us, they will deal with the police. But the moment the police in those regions are sufficiently resourced, the bandits will know. I mean, because in a gunfight, there's always the might of the firepower. If I come with a small arm and you are with a bazooka, I definitely know that this is an even match. And that is what is happening, that the police are going with small arms, that the bandits have a bazooka. So you have to change that matrix, and the only way to change that matrix is by giving them more resources. So this short-term measure of now saying we are going to use the military because they have the equipment and personnel to be able to deal with it is not going to help in the long term.
It will not translate to anything.
Yes.
Eric Theory, President of the Law Society, thank you very much for joining us. And we also want to say thank you to Sarah Correre, the MP for Laikipia North, who joined us via video link, but we had a technical issue towards the tail end of the conversation. Thank you as well for watching. This is Newsline on KTN News and KTN Home. We've had a long conversation on the unfolding situation in the North. We want to wish every person who is in the North all the best. And also, let's make sure that the humanitarian issue is first and foremost being addressed by the government. Asante sana for watching. Have a good night.